This is the White Rim. "100 miles of dirt, rock, dust, and mud. "20 individual campsites that often book within minutes after each season's reservation window opens. Bring your 4x4 high-clearance vehicle and enjoy high shelf roads, rocky obstacles, and epic views of Utah Canyon Country. Don't miss the Fort Bottom Ruin Trail. This trail takes adventurous hikers up a rocky cliff face to a mesa top where a 1,000-year-old Puebloan ruin still stands. This trail also is a showcase of grand views over the Green River and surrounding canyons. The National Park Service issues 50 vehicle permits and 50 mountain bike permits a day to explore the White Rim. Don't forget to print out your permit and have it in your vehicle, as rangers often patrol the roads. Expect rain, wind, sun, or snow. You never know what the White Rim will throw at you. Keep an eye out for mountain bikers. I don't know what makes them do what they're doing, but God bless them. Don't forget to stop and enjoy the views. Just keep your feet away from the edge. Most 4x4 drivers spend 3 days and 2 nights on the White Rim. They say you can drive it in one day, but I don't know why you'd want to rush all this beauty. Regardless of how long you're on the trail, don't forget to bring your food, your water, your shelter, and anything else you might want, because you're not going to find it out here. Keep your eyes peeled for the natives like these bighorn sheep. They may weigh over 300 pounds, but they are often hard to find in these vast expanses. It's amazing to realize how small we really are when compared to these vast landscapes. Musselman Arch is a popular day trip along the White Rim and is also a great place to stop and enjoy your lunch. Between Musselman Arch and Potash Road, you will find several sections of narrow shelf roads. Keep your eyes open for any oncoming traffic and enjoy the views. The Schaefer switchbacks are the crowning jewel of the White Rim. Initially built as a cattle trail for pioneer settlers in the early 1900s, uranium miners improved and expanded the trail in the 1950s. Today, the switchbacks ascend 1,500 feet upward from the valley below to the Island in the Sky district of Canyonlands National Park. Thank you for joining us on our 3-day adventure along the White Rim. Make sure to stop at the Air Up area at the end of the White Rim to visit with Clyde. Clyde and his friends love hot dog buns and anything else you might leave lying around. Who's Clyde? Here he is. Now go find your own adventure. Hi, my name's Chris. The trip that we took, my husband Bill and I took, was in early May of 2022. And I mean really early, like the first, second, third. So at that time of year, you never know what kind of weather you're going to get. Bill and I had some experience with Jeeps before we took this trip. Our first together Jeep experience was in Alaska for our honeymoon in 2013, where we went on one of those tours where they let you drive your own Jeep Sport. It was just a 2-door, no bells and whistles, and we really enjoyed driving that and seeing how capable even it was, just a basic model. So that led to us buying in 2015. We bought our first Jeep together, 2013 Rubicon. It had about 40,000 miles on it. And so we got to enjoy taking that on some trips down to West Virginia, Kentucky, things like that. But at that point in time, we were still staying from hotel to hotel or Airbnb and VRBO. We weren't actually camping yet. From there, we also got to enjoy some other Jeep experiences. We were out in Utah and Colorado in the summer, July of 2020. We were some of those rare people who said, you know what, we're not letting COVID stop us, and we still went. We still went to Arches, we still went to Canyonlands, we still went to Ouray, and we drove the Alpine Loop, we drove Imogene and Cinnamon and Engineer, and did all those passes, as well as Potash Roads and the Schaefer switchbacks in the Moab area. No, none of those are very technical trails, but at that time we didn't have our Rubicon with us. We were just driving a typical rental Jeep, unlimited Jeep at that point, so nothing special. But it was that was very, very, very capable, and we were very surprised how well that went. So after that particular trip, Bill and I started talking about what we wanted to do in 2022, because in 2022, we had 2 kids graduating from college, one in Ohio and one in Utah. And it made perfect sense for us to decide we're going to drive from Ohio out to Utah and just enjoy ourselves on the way, and then enjoy several days in Logan for the graduation before we returned. And so on the way, before we decided to go out, we decided we were going to overland, and we'd always looked at the White Rim and wanted to do the White Rim, but we are not mountain bikers. We're not going to bike the mountain, the entire 100 miles. And so this was our perfect opportunity to start putting together the ability to overland ourselves with camping gear. We already had a Coleman 2-burner stove, so that was our stove at the time. We looked at other options, but just decided we'd use what we had. We looked at using the tents we had and sleeping bags and things like that we had, but eventually we settled on purchasing an overland trailer. And this one just kind of happened to fall in our lap. We were looking on Facebook Marketplace. Actually, one of my coworkers was looking on Facebook Marketplace when I was talking about buying a trailer for off-roading, and found this and said, you need to look at this. And so after I looked at it, we discovered that there's a Marine in Sandusky who now I believe styles himself Lake Erie Overland, and that he had an overland trailer that he had built for him and his family. They had used it for a trip to Colorado, but were selling it because he would build one, use it to test it out, and then he would sell it. So usually building 1 or 2 a year. And we went up and looked at it, and it was exactly what we needed and wanted, with all of the great off-road capabilities and clearance. It had I believe it's about a 20-gallon water tank, instant hot water, had a rooftop tent on top, plenty of storage, and these rolling storage bins that we could put all of our other stuff in to put in. At that time also we invested in a large RTIC cooler, one of these better, thicker walled coolers. I think it would cost about $200 at the time, so it wasn't extravagant. It wasn't yet a refrigerator, which thankfully we have now, but at the time that cooler worked perfectly fine for our trip. So we prepared for that trip, and part of that preparation is getting your permits. Don't forget to look at these early. If you want to do the White Rim, you have to get your overnight permits early, unless you're going to try and do the whole thing in one day, which I would not recommend, especially with a trailer. No point in taking your trailer if you're doing it in one day, and it really slows you down. So literally within 5 minutes of the opening of the season window for reservations, I was online, I was trying to book those, and literally I would type something in and want it and say I want to do this, and by the time I hit enter, it had already been taken and I'd have to choose something else. So know that they go very, very quickly. Within 15 minutes, pretty much every campsite was booked, and I was very grateful that I had 2 that made sense. So we ended up booking Hardscrabble B and Gooseberry B, and both of those worked out well distance-wise for us to make that trip and make that travel. So after that, you have those permits. You have to print off those permits, make sure you have them in the vehicle. We were stopped at one point by a ranger who was checking permits, as well as making sure you appeared to know what you were doing. You weren't likely to get yourself stuck, stranded, you had water, things like that. So be aware that they do check those. So now we're to the point where we're going out west, and on the way out west, we tried to do as much true overlanding as we could, which from our perspective is finding those dispersed campsites that are free wherever you can find them. But it doesn't always happen. We got lucky on the way out and found some, but obviously when we got to the White Rim, we knew where our campsites were. You had to pay in advance for those sites, and you also had to remember to pay, we paid online for our entry fee into Canyonlands, because you also have to have that daily entry fee. Keep in mind there are restrictions on the White Rim, so you can't take your pet, you can't have fires, open campfires, and you can't take your drone. You do want to take your water. We had several gallon jugs of drinking water. I think it was 1 per person per day that we made sure we had. In addition to that, we had filled the entire tank on our trailer so that we weren't going to run out of water. It meant we could have showers on the trail if we wanted it, though it was so cold we didn't choose to do that. There are vault toilets at each of the different campsites, but keep in mind that they're vault toilets and they don't always have toilet paper. They usually have toilet paper and they're usually clean, but you can't guarantee that. It just depends on who's been through before you. The first day we went out, we didn't start until later in the day. We'd hiked Corona Arch during the day and then decided to go. We had our 2013 Jeep Rubicon with the trailer. I think we were driving on 33s at that point in time. I don't think we had the snorkel yet. I can't honestly remember if we had the snorkel or not. It's probably in the pictures. But then our friend Dylan joined us, and it was really, really great to have him in his Rubicon. And he drove as well because we could put him in front of us, and he could radio back to us to let us know if there was any traffic coming so that we could make sure to get off. Because the last thing we wanted to have to do was back up with that trailer, and luckily the entire time on the trip we never were required to back up with the trailer. So I was very, very grateful to have that person basically running in front of us as a scout to tell us what was coming up and whether we needed to be aware of that. So the first day was a very short day for us. We enjoyed the trip down into the canyon and along the river to our first campsite. That first campsite had some shade, but very little, right by the river. You can get to the river, but it was a couple foot drop down to the river, so you really couldn't enjoy the river. Lots of bushes, lots of scratchy thorn kind of bushes, as well as all of the tumbleweed that I managed to step in and found that they're pretty darn sharp and can cut your feet up pretty quickly. So we cooked over the propane stove. We kind of cheated in that the meals we brought for dinners were from a company called Real Eats at the time. Unfortunately, they're out of business, but literally they were decent tasting food that were sealed in boil bags, and you just had to boil them for 6 minutes and you were eating a fabulous dinner. No longer available, but make sure you take some good food because it's definitely part of the experience is cooking that good food on the White Ram or on any overlanding trip. So next morning got up and started out at a fairly decent hour. It had been fairly cold the night before, so we had all enjoyed the fact that we had a diesel heater for our tent, and we were really grateful for it that night. It was pretty darn windy that night, but luckily it calmed down and you could look out and see the stars after, 2 or 3 in the morning, and it was very beautiful. So from there, we drove up the incline to the trail at Fort Bottom Ruin. I think it's about 3 miles, I'm not sure. It didn't take us more than a couple hours, hour and a half, 2 hours. It was very windy the morning we did it, to the point where there are some very narrow stretches that you have to walk on that literally have a drop off on both sides of you. And luckily the wind was blowing in a direction that didn't make us feel like we were going to be blown off either way. And you go from there and you follow the trail, and it's a beautiful trail, beautiful views of the surrounding area. And you have 2 choices. One is you can hike down into the bottom next to the river where there is an old cowboy cabin. We did not do that. We could see it from where we were, but we decided we did not want to have to hike all the way down into the bottom and back up again, so we didn't. But we did see very clearly the Puebloan ruin that is on top of the mesa. And if you go back behind that mesa, there is a way where you can scramble up a cliff face. And it's a little sketchy, but you don't really have to have a rope. If the wind had been blowing a different direction, we wouldn't have gone up top because the wind thankfully was blowing us into the cliff face instead of away from it. And if it had been blowing away from it, I would have been concerned about getting pushed off. It wasn't that tall, it might have been 10 feet, but it's a challenge, it's a scramble, but all 3 of us made it up. Please remember, if you do climb up there, you cannot go in the ruin, you should not go near the ruin, but obviously feel free to take pictures and just soak that in. We want to make sure that those historic ruins are there for everybody else to enjoy afterwards, and scrambling in them, around them, on them isn't going to maintain them. So from there, we hiked back out, and from there we kept going. From there you go to Hardscrabble Hill. I don't remember it being very challenging, but I wasn't driving. Bill was driving. Bill drove not everything, but I'd say he probably drove 80% of this trip because he's the good driver. And I know that, and I'm the one who takes the film. I'm the one who does the videos. And so he was driving, and he made it look easy. But if somebody had been coming the other way, it would have been concerning. So again, it was great to have that person in front of us letting us know somebody was coming. From there, you go past Holman Canyon. We had intended to stop in Holman Canyon and walk down into that slot a little ways, but it was rainy / snowy / sleet, very cold, very windy, and none of us really wanted to get out and walk around. So at that point, we kept going. From there, you go past Murphy's Hogback. Murphy's Hogback is another steep incline. You want to be very careful going up and down it. Again, watch for people. That was the area that we found the most people, the most congestion. We had to wait for some other vehicles. Most of them, however, were stopping at some of the hardscrabble or Murphy's Hogback camps to look at the views, have lunch, things like that. And so we just made sure we got through that area and kept going so we can get away from that small crowd that we ran into. From there, we did pass by White Crack. My greatest regret on this trip was not stopping at White Crack, but we were already behind schedule. We knew we had a lot of miles left to make it before we got to Gooseberry Bee. We were all tired, and the weather still wasn't really cooperating, so none of us were really excited about going out and walking around. After that, the roads were fairly easy. We did get into Gooseberry at a good time, and by the time we got there and started setting up camp, the sun had come back out. The weather was more beautiful, the wind had cut down, and we could just sit back and enjoy making and eating dinner. And also from there you can walk over, it's not right on the edge of the canyon, definitely not, it's far from that, but you can walk, I don't know, about a quarter mile, third of a mile from the campsite over to the canyon edge, and there's some beautiful views, and just views for as far as the eye can see. It makes you feel very, very small. From there the next morning we got up fairly decent hour, packed everything up, and kept heading out. It took us a lot longer than we thought it was going to get out that last bit from Gooseberry all the way up Schaefer switchbacks. Again, trailer slows you way down, and we knew that, and we knew that Dylan could have been far ahead of us by miles and miles if he had wanted to be. We stopped at Musselman Arch, and I think we had lunch there. It's definitely worth stopping to see. It's very distinctive, very interesting, not very far at all from the road. There's a very small parking lot though, so be very, very mindful of that if you're parking there, to make sure that you leave room for other people coming in and out, because that is a popular day trip. That was actually our first trip on the White Rim. We had been there in 2020. We took the Jeep that we had, the rental Jeep at that time, and we drove out onto the White Rim and did the Overlook Trail and stopped at Musselman Arch at that point, and then drove back out on a day permit and drove Schaefer switchbacks. Between Musselman and Schaefer, there are several areas of steep shelf road, narrow steep shelf road, so just be aware of that. There's plenty of room as long as you're not trying to pass somebody on them. There generally are pull-out points, so you don't have to worry about that very much, but again, great to have somebody in front of you that was a lot more nimble if you've got a trailer. By the time we got out to Schaefer switchbacks, it was beautiful, sunny, going up those switchbacks. I took the liberty of filming the entire time going up, though I've cut it down for this, and it's crazy to me to see mountain bikers riding up this. I don't know how they do it. Keep in mind, we really enjoyed driving that White Rim over the days, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who has an interest in doing that. Take the time, plan your trip, go out and enjoy it, because you never know what you're going to see, who you're going to meet, and how long you have to enjoy this world. So make sure you go out and enjoy every minute you can. Thanks for watching.